Well, Joe Kent is a Gold Star husband, a retired Green Beret, and a veteran of 11 combat tours across 20 years' service in the US Army. President Trump appointed him to the role of director of the National Counterterrorism Center, a position from which he resigned last week. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, he said in his statement. It's clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. And I'm pleased to say that Joe Kent joins me now. Joe Kent, I'm just wondering, a week ago your life was very, very different to what it is today. You've been through what I would call the mincer since you went public. You're a man used to very difficult situations. How are you feeling about how this week has gone for you?
I feel really good. Thank you for having me on. First off, I appreciate the opportunity. But look, I didn't reach my conclusion lightly. But by the time I made the decision, seeing how we got into this war and seeing the path that we're going down now, I knew that I was doing the right thing. And I still feel the same way today. So my main goal is to hopefully change the dialogue on how we're looking at things in Iran and hopefully give the president some opportunity to get us out of this conflict.
This sort of central charge that there was no imminent threat. You know, we've heard people like Lindsey Graham and others saying they were 2 weeks away from doing something, which seems ridiculous. You were in the perfect position to know what the actual real threat was. How would you assess it?
The only imminent threat was of Israel attacking Iran and then Iran retaliating against our bases in the region because the Iranians knew that the Israelis couldn't accomplish this military objective they have of regime change without our support. So we knew that was going to happen. That was the only imminent threat. Once President Trump came into office in 2025, the Iranians closely observed a escalation ladder. By that, I mean, prior to President Trump coming back into office, the Iranian proxies in the region had attacked our troops hundreds of times throughout the region after October 7th. Once Trump came back in, the Iranians deliberately stopped their proxies from attacking our troops, knowing that President Trump wanted to get to the negotiating table. He did just that with Steve Witkoff and others. When the 12-day war was launched, the Iranians didn't attack us. They made sure their proxies didn't attack our forces in the region. They didn't actually take a strike against us until we hit the nuclear facilities. And then they launched an equal amount of missiles that we dropped on bombs, and they dropped on their nuclear facilities. And then they eagerly got back to the negotiating table with us. So there actually was no threat emanating directly from Iran. They had the capability to pose a threat to us, but so do many nations. But we did not have any intelligence to indicate that they were on the cusp of attacking us. The only real threat was from Israel forcing our hand.
And notwithstanding the fact that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, publicly stated that actually America launched a preemptive attack because Israel, he didn't name the country, but obviously he was talking about, had indicated they were going to attack Iran and therefore there would be a response and America would have to get involved. They then tried to rein that back. But he was on the record as basically saying, we did this because of Israel's decision to attack. You, with your criticism, have now been accused by Mitch McConnell of being anti-Semitic. You've had Matt Brooks, the president of the Republican Jewish Coalition, saying that your appearance on Tucker Carlson's podcast was part of an ongoing problem, so inferring the same. How do you respond to that charge that you're anti-Semitic?
So in my criticism of really our policy, the American policy towards Israel, I've never mentioned the religion of the people of the state of Israel. My issue is the fact that we have a foreign government that is dictating our policy in the Middle East, and in particular dictating when and how we go to war. That's my main issue. Look, these guys are going to throw out the anti-Semitic claim because they want people debating that, and they also want people to cower because no one wants to be called anti-Semitic. They're doing that because they don't want to discuss the fundamental issue, which is exactly what Secretary Rubio said, that we were forced into this war because we knew that the Israelis were going to attack, which would set off a series of reactions from the Iranians. So that's why we went ahead and conducted the attack, because our hand was forced by the Israelis. That's what Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and all the neoconservatives don't want to address. And that's the main issue here that we should be discussing.
Of course, at the same time, it's been pretty obvious to people, I think, that from what Antony Blinken said, that Israel had tried this before. They tried to tell President Obama and President Biden, we're going to attack. Are you with us? We're going to attack Iran. Both times the answer came back no, and on both occasions, Israel didn't attack. I thought that was very significant.
And I'm sure the Israelis told the Trump administration this in an effort to get them to be stronger than the Biden administration and than the Obama administration. What I pointed out in my resignation letter is that there was an echo chamber that was created around President Trump by key Israeli government officials and then media talking heads, basically saying that this was the only time for us to take down the regime. They also moved the red line in a very clever way. President Trump had always said that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, the Iranian regime under the previous supreme leader basically agreed, and they had a fatwa that made a prohibition on Iran developing a nuclear weapon. So the Israelis came in with the goal of moving that red line because basically the Iranians said they wanted to continue to have the ability to enrich. And that kind of got us into this conundrum. But then in January, when the Iranians were feeling the weight of the economic sanctions that President Trump had put on them, they took to the streets. Again, the Israeli lobby came back. The key Israeli officials came back and said, now is the prime time to strike. If you strike, there's a clear path to victory. The regime will simply just fall. And so basically, through those series of events, we were led to believe that there was a clear path to victory. But in order for the Israelis to get what they wanted, they went ahead and they said that we, the Israelis, were going to attack, again, forcing our hand and dragging us into this war.
What are your feelings about President Trump? He said since you resigned, he's not a fan. He thinks you're weak on security, which does beg the question, well, why did he make you what he made you in the first place? What do you feel about his response since you resigned?
I understood that when I left, especially in the manner that I chose to leave very publicly, that he was going to have to say something. Look, I don't take any of this personally. What I want President Trump to do is to realize that the initial policy that he had towards Iran, especially in his first administration, when he utilized a series of key strikes against Iranian terrorists like Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi Mohandas, but then he leveraged the economic weight of America with max pressure sanctions. He had Iran contained. He knew that the Iranians knew that he meant business because of what he did to Qasem Soleimani, who basically walked all over Obama, walked all over George Bush. President Trump had them basically exactly where we needed them, where they were ready to get to the negotiating table. And President Trump was on the cusp of having a historic peace that I believe is still obtainable. But first and foremost, what President Trump has to do is reset and rethink our relationship with Israel. We cannot have Israel in the driver's seat of our foreign policy as it's been in the Middle East for my entire lifetime.
You say it's not personal, but he's got quite personal with you. And for context, some viewers may not be aware of this, but your first wife, Shannon, was a US Navy technician who was killed in Syria in 2019 in a suicide bombing, leaving behind your two children. You married your current wife, Heather, in August 2023, more than 4 years later. Donald Trump said this week about this.
Look, I'm not a fan of the guy. He was a man that I met at Dover. He came and his wife was killed. He remarried fairly quickly. His wife was killed.
I mean, that was a nasty dig. You married very quickly. You know, whatever he was trying to infer, it wasn't pleasant. That is personal, isn't it? Did that offend you? That hurt you?
I mean, of course, it's personal. It's not pleasant to hear the president speak in that manner. But look, again, the stakes are really high, Piers. I mean, my late wife was killed in one of these Middle Eastern wars that we shouldn't have been in the first place. Hundreds of my friends were killed in these wars as well. My entire generation, basically after 9/11, spent our adult lives in war. I did multiple combat deployments. The stakes couldn't be higher. And so really, I frankly don't care what the president says about me personally. Again, I understand because I went out the way that I did, that this is inevitable. What I want all the focus to be on is how we got here and how we get out of the situation that we're in, and how we must restrain the Israelis and how we must use diplomacy with the Iranians to get out of the situation before it spirals further out of control. I think we're at a huge inflection point with the potential of putting boots on the ground, deploying forces into Krog Island, or just having more violence and more of the energy flow coming out of the Straits of Hormuz being disrupted.
It seems to me, I've known Trump a long time, it seems to me he's looking for an off-ramp. This has got way more complicated than he thought it might be. What does an off-ramp look like for Donald Trump right now where he could claim some kind of legitimate victory without losing too much face? Because ultimately, as we know with him, that will likely be his biggest calculation.
First and foremost, he has to restrain the Israelis. As we've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks, every single time that President Trump says he wants some form of a de-escalation with the Iranians, the Israelis go and take major strikes against Iranian energy or other key Iranian targets, basically to disrupt the potential for any kind of de-escalation. No negotiations with the Iranians will be successful until the Israelis are restrained. And you have to do that by saying to the Israelis, we will help you defend yourself, but we will not give you the capability to go on the offense. If you guys go on the offense, you're going it on your own. And the Israelis have never been told that before. And we have to be very, very serious about that. Step two is going to the Iranians in a very serious way, talk about lifting sanctions that will give them some economic relief, but will also get the Straits of the Hormuz open back up again for commerce to get the flow of energy going once more. The negotiations are going to be very challenging. I think President Trump has the skills and the force of will to make this happen. But unless we restrain the Israelis, all of our efforts will be for naught.
Just to segue to something a bit different, but during an interview with Michael Schellenberger, you said that you're skeptical that Tyler Robinson, who confessed to killing Charlie Kirk, was the lone shooter. You also said the FBI did not properly investigate his killing. As I said, the FBI was pretty forceful in saying we couldn't investigate further. I saw no action being taken. And you alluded to potential foreign involvement. Now, this is, as you know, sparked a lot of kickback from Charlie Kirk fans and former colleagues. First, did you stand by what you said? And would you like to elaborate on it?
I do. Look, I want justice for Charlie Kirk, as I think every American does. The National Counterterrorism Center's purview was investigating all foreign ties. I think based on what we've seen in the public, there was folks who had pre-knowledge of Charlie Kirk's assassination. From my vantage point at NCTC, I don't believe that a complete investigation was done, and so I think that's important. As far as the case against Tyler Robinson goes, I can't speak to him. It sounds to me like they have enough evidence to convict him that will play out in the court of law. But from my vantage point, what we were responsible for, I believe there was more work to be done.
And is your gut feeling that he did not act alone?
The potential of him having assistance, again, with the people saying they had pre-knowledge, with the people jumping up in the crowd and claiming that they were the one who took the shot, it does appear that there could be additional people that had pre-knowledge of it. I think that's about all that I can say on that. And again, from my vantage point in NCTC during the investigation, I don't believe that we were able to run down every single lead possible.
And in relation to possible foreign involvement, have you got any clarity about where that may have come from?
All I can say is that there was more work for us to be done in terms of the investigation itself, and so I just have to leave that there.
Finally, Joe, a lot of people have been more aware of you in the last week. They've been watching you talking in the media. They've seen you be very, as many see it, very courageous in standing up for what you believe in. And they're aware, of course, of your glittering record serving your country. Many people now wondering, is this a precursor to you potentially running for office yourself? Do you have that aspiration?
It's not. I've attempted to run for Congress twice. I'm not in Congress now. It was a good experience. I'm glad I went through it. But I'm not doing this because I want to run for Congress. I am doing this because I cannot support yet another war in the Middle East that we have no vital national security interest in. I can't support sending more young men and women off to pay the ultimate sacrifice. And I want to move towards ending this war as fast as I possibly can.
You have run before, but I guess the office I was talking about was a slightly higher one. Would you think that you would make a better president than Donald Trump?
No, I think actually President Trump is still a historic president. Even though I had to leave because I disagree with him on this very important issue, I think President Trump has done amazing things for our country. And again, I think he has the potential right now to get us out of a quagmire with Iran that will basically obviously cost our nation dearly, but also cost his legacy and really what the MAGA movement stands for. It will cost us that legacy and potential for the future. So I want to use any public platform that I have to encourage President Trump to move us away from this conflict with Iran as quickly as he possibly can, and to redefine our relationship with the Israelis to prevent this from happening in the future.
I mean, the logical sort of conclusion from what you just said is if he doesn't do the right thing here, this could wreck his legacy and wreck the MAGA legacy.
It certainly would. That's not my primary concern. My primary concern is more young men and women coming home in caskets at Dover, like my late wife and so many of my friends did, and then also the catastrophic effects that will have on our nation if we continue to plunge headlong into this war. But obviously, a second and third order effect would be political, and I think everything that MAGA stands for and that we fought for the last almost decade now could be squandered if we get sucked into yet another regime change war in the Middle East, which was one of the core tenets that MAGA stood against.
And one of the core things that he campaigned that he wouldn't do. Joe Ken, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Pierce. I really appreciate it.